Grandstand ventured to Port Melbourne for the clash between Port and the Bendigo Gold. David Rhys-Jones, we expected a big win from Port Melbourne. We got a 10-goal victory, but it wasn't as lopsided as the scoreline might suggest.
No, Bendigo, to their credit, were very competitive and really took it up to Port Melbourne, especially early. And there's some great passages of play. You know, young players, it's good to see them taking the game on and scoring. And I like the way that they were quite prepared to go through the corridor and take the ball through the centre square. Was brave but bold, but it got results for them.
They were probably slightly flattered by the fact that Port Melbourne was off target in the first quarter. They had 14 scoring shots to 4, but only managed 5-9 to 3-1. What was a worrying sign in the first quarter was the amount of ball that Port Melbourne was able to mark inside their 50, and then John Baird continued that in the second quarter.
Yeah, and that come from having a young team who's not as physically big as their opposition, and resulted in quite a number of marks inside 50 for Port Melbourne. But they weren't able to capitalise, and to Bendigo's credit, and they had some very good players, headed by a young bloke called Megan, who was with the Gold Coast and picked up his 33 possessions and was close to best on ground.
Dean Galea kicking one of his goals. That was in the second term. I reckon Aussie Jones would have been happy enough. There's Chris Kane doing what Chris Kane does, finishing clinically. I reckon Aussie Jones, if he had been offered 20 points at quarter time, 27 points at half time, he would have taken that, and that's what they got.
Yeah, and look, they were competitive without looking like winning, but they've got a lot of talent there, and they've got something to work with. If they can get some bigger bodies into this team next year, they can really sort of start taking it to the good teams.
There was only one period of the game where Port commanded play for a long period of time, and that was the 15 minutes between the 3 and 18-minute marks of the third quarter, when they kicked 6 goals, and effectively that was what put it to bed.
Yeah, they really did. Port Melbourne dominate that third quarter, and it looked like it could have been a whitewash, but to Bendigo's credit, to come back and kick 6 goals in the last quarter and match Port Melbourne was a fantastic effort.
They actually drew the last quarter, 6 goals, 3 apiece. Galea got things going with a couple in the last quarter. Hinkley joined in with a couple of goals for Port Melbourne as well. So they finished up kicking a big score, 22 goals, 21, 153. They haven't kicked a lot of big scores this year, Port Melbourne. A goal to McInnes on the siren actually meant that Bendigo kicked the last 3 of the quarter as well. So the numbers tell you that they walked away with not as much of the football and certainly not as much on the scoreboard, but a bit of promise coming out of the performance of the Bendigo Gold. Final scores in round 13 at Northport Oval. Port Melbourne 22-21, 153. Are they back on track? They've got a tough draw coming up in front of them, and Bendigo beaten today by 59 points, 14-10-94 on Grandstand.